Well, there are teachers and then there are truth bearers. My guest today is the kind of woman who doesn't just speak the truth, she embodies it. Raquel Reyna is a radical spiritual designer, a revolutionary voice in human design, and a mentor to thousands of rebels, mystics, and misfits, ready to reclaim their divine blueprint. With a master's in spiritual psychology and a PhD in consciousness, a sole mission to help you burn the rulebook and live your design. She's not here to keep you comfortable. She's here to wake you up. If you've ever felt too much, too wild, or too different, you're in the right place. Because Raquel Reyna is about to remind us that the world doesn't need more conformity. It needs more truth. Raquel Reyna, up next. Raquel Reyna, thank you so much for joining. I'm so excited to have you on the show. I've been thinking about you all day, just so you know.
Me too, me too.
So I'll just dive right into my questions. You call yourself a mutant. And for those listening, please don't be offended by the word because some people are saying right now, Jackie, what are you doing? What does that really mean? And are most people too afraid to admit that they are one?
I think so. It is actually a term of endearment according to the system that we use in a lot of our spiritual teachings and a lot of our methods. One of the tools we use is a system called human design.
Okay.
And there's three major circuit groups in the system, which is individual, tribal, and collective. So the names were not given by me. The names were given by the founder of this system. And the individual circuitry we like to call lovingly mutants because it's those people that are here to break the mold. They're here to do things differently, and they may not fit in to groups. They may not fit in when they were children. They may not have fit into school. They may have been, the outcasts. And according to us, these people are needed. They're really important. And it's so comforting to know that you're designed for this and everybody needs a mutant in their life because they're the ones who bring in the new ideas. They start something different. They create new businesses. They create new paths. They forge new directions. And so the mutants are so important. And there's been a lot of pain for these people, especially the way we look at things through astrological lenses and trends and things moving. And so over the last 411 years, we've been run by more tribal institutions. And by tribal, what we mean by that are families, groups of people, businesses, corporations, and groups that ask us to sacrifice the self for the good of the group or the good of the country or, this type of energy. And what the mutants are saying is, no, 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 that's not really working. And that trend is kind of dying. Now it's about recognizing the individual, what the needs are of the individual first. And then once you have an overflow, then you can help with the people who need it.
Yeah, I completely agree. Authenticity as well. Yeah, absolutely. Was there a moment when you realized that the spiritual path wasn't about love and light, but about raw truth and fire?
Wow, that is such a great question. It has taken me a very, very long time to integrate a lot of my spiritual experiences. And I think the reason for that was because when I tapped into whatever you want to call it, something beyond the material realm, the multidimensional, the out of body, the out of the ordinary. When I started to have these types of experiences, my practical world started to fall apart and things fell to the wayside. Like, how do I make money? How do I exist? How do I relate to people? So I think right out the gate, I was aware that the spiritual journey came with big initiations, big changes, big shifts. Some people wouldn't recognize you anymore or even want to hear about your stories anymore. People ostracized me right out the gate, made fun of me, and I was not able to live traditional lives, a traditional life. And so I think today as I am much, much more wise and older, start with the more wise part. I've learned how to balance those spiritual experiences. I've learned how to embody the mystical without letting it uproot my entire life. I've
Mhm.
learned how to stay in the calm and the connected. And that comes through years of building healing modalities, working on my mindset, having routines, really learning the spiritual psychology, which is a big part of my background and my knowledge, is working through issues and discovering how to really embody the spiritual on the earth plane in the practical realms. So I think it's so important. I've seen so many people do sort of spiritual override or be unable to ground their spiritual experiences and their lives fall apart. I've seen all of it. And so I think it's so, so important to know that it's really normal to have spiritual crisis
Mhm.
and for things to fall apart at first.
Yeah, I want to question that for a second because you talk about embodiment of the mystical. What's the most rebellious thing that you've done in the name of spiritual growth?
Wow, that is such a freaking great question. I think I find my energy to be rebellious since I was young. I'm very, very rebellious in nature. So, my first experience, spiritual experience, happened when I met a shaman in my 20s. He's kind of famous now, but he wasn't then. Don Miguel Ruiz, who is the author of the Four Agreements. But at that time, he was a shaman teaching in his living room and came from the lineage of the Toltec. And he's a powerful shaman. So I stumbled on him in my 20s when I was in college through meeting his son, who was going to the same university as me. And then I started doing and studying all of his work. And so, really, instead of I got accepted, I got a full paid ride to NYU right after getting my BA. And instead of doing my master's degree at that time, I decided to study with the shamans and travel all over the world, going to Machu Picchu, going to Teotihuacan, going to Egypt and Israel. And to my poor mother's, my poor mother's dismay, I chose not to get my master's degree and I chose to take a very intense spiritual direction. So that was my first rebellious action. I was having these visions at the time, and I thought the visions were things I needed to manifest. So after traveling, I was having these visions of a spiritual type of creative performance band. So in my 20s, instead of getting a traditional job, also being the rebel, I started a performance group in San Francisco.
Hmm.
And it was very successful. But talk about the fire of the spiritual path, it became also very dark. There was a lot of addiction. It went the wrong direction. And my soul was like, nope, that's the wrong way, and pulled me out very quickly. Then the rebellious thing from that direction was going into corporate America.
Oh,
So
wow.
then my next decade was being in corporate America, which my artist friends thought was absolutely selling out. So then the next rebellious move was in my 40s without a safety net, again realizing that that corporate career was needed for a while to get grounded, to get practical, to build my feet, to get my life together. And then again, I had those spiritual nudgings that it's not enough, your soul's growing again, you need to step out again. So then that was in my 40s now, leaving corporate America without a safety net, dropping the 401k, dropping the guaranteed salary. And that's when I started studying human design, which I found out I was a splenic projector and realized, oh my God, I'm not designed to do this kind of work. And so my path again took a rebellious turn to create a new career online as a spiritual teacher and creating a community of people that I could serve that were creative, spiritual, mutants,
Yeah.
and help to nurture my those aspects of myself and people that couldn't live traditional lives. And yet, the business aspect of the corporate career really helped me to be able to ground and create a business structure. So, I love your question. It really made me contemplate and think because I do feel very rebellious. And then at the same time, I've been rebellious to the point where it doesn't make sense anymore.
Yeah.
And, where you have to kind of like, okay, well, what really do you want to rebel in? There are some things that are great, like having a nice income. Maybe rebel against how you do it and who you're doing it for, but let's embody the rebellion in a different way. So that has really been a huge part of my life is what are you going to rebel and why? And what do you want to keep? Like what traditional things are good? Like I got married literally 1 year ago, a year and a half ago, and I'm not young, and it was my first marriage. So I rebelled against the institution of marriage as well until I found my spiritual partner, somebody that I really felt spiritually connected to. So there was also a lot of rebellion in that direction. My mom was just like, get married, go to graduate school, live the traditional life. So there's been a lot of rebellion. And now I felt ready to take on a more traditional lifestyle with my now husband, who's also my business partner and spiritual partner. And it's been so beautiful to really have a mature relationship and a choice of commitment based on lots of bad relationships.
Yeah. Yeah, I get it completely. So, after listening to that, I have to ask another question. You said that previously, most people are walking someone else's path. How do you know if the life that we're living is a lie?
Yeah, so this is where the human design piece really came in for me. Human design is a map and it helps to show you where you're living as your not self. They call it your not self. And the not self is where you've been conditioned and told how to live. Your parents told you you should be like this.
Hmm.
You were taught that you need to go to school, get a good job, get married, have children. And so a lot of that is what we call conditioning. And so unraveling those places, some conditioning you want to take forward in your life, right? Some things are true for you and some things are not. So, a lot of the journey I take my clients on is exactly that, unraveling what is your truth, what is true for you, and what is your not self or a lie. And using your map, it's like a DNA code because the DNA, it maps out to the I Ching. So, this is quite a rabbit hole. If your listeners are like me and they like to geek out on these types of rabbit holes, if you look at how the DNA fits in with the I Ching, the symbolism and the patterns are uncanny. So we use the DNA, we use the I Ching, and it maps out how to read certain patterns and dynamics through your astrology, your astrological, and the chakra system to help you decipher what's more true for you and what's more conditioned, which aspects are more conditioned for you. And through this experimentation, it's all an experiment, by the way. It's not information to believe, it's kind of an experiment where you're like, oh, wait, I want to try this on because that feels right for me. It helps you decide and figure out what is my true North Star, right? What's my truth? What feels the most true for me? And what feels like the greatest not self? Like, what have I taken on that I was told by a teacher or told by a parent, and why? So, it could be when you go through the way we go through the chakra system, you go through whether people are overthinkers or you go through whether they are overdoers,
Yeah.
the lower chakras, the root, the sacral, or the ego, which is more about insecurity. Like, are you doing something to feel worthy? Are you doing something to fit in? Right. So it's like really unraveling, why are you doing the actions you're doing? Does it create true, juicy satisfaction? Does it create internal feelings of recognition and satisfaction and success? Or is it you're pushing towards something you think you should do, and instead it causes bitterness and anger and frustration? So it's kind
Okay.
of like that spectrum
So
is
I was going to ask you then, what's the wildest transformation that you've seen in someone after discovering their true type?
so much. I mean, so much. Usually you are conditioned into the opposite of who you are. So I'm a projector. I was conditioned to be a manifesting generator. Work, like manifest. And projectors are here to kind of wait for recognition. So my life completely transformed. My clients' lives transformed like crazy. So the manifester in our system is only 8% of the population. So the manifestors are the only type here to initiate action. That will have the best result for them is to begin with initiation, but they're conditioned to not initiate. They're conditioned to wait. So we see a lot of manifestors who are feeling insecure because they have so much impact. Now, let me clarify something for anyone listening. We're all manifestors. Like we're all here to manifest the life we love. We're all here to be manifestors. The difference with the systems that we work with is that we all manifest differently through different techniques and different styles. So it's not a one size fits all model. So if you're someone who's like me, who had spiritual experiences, tried many different things, but I spent a lot of time being burned out, feeling unseen, feeling bitter, feeling like I hadn't really found my way because I had been doing it in a manifestation style that wasn't really correct for me. So some of the transformations, to go back to your question, that I've seen is manifestors who were repressed in their manifestation and felt that they made too much of an impact. And once I told them that they are the fire starters, they're here to go out and make things happen. I've seen like within a couple month period, a manifestor get that book deal that they've been wanting to get their whole life just by knowing that they're here to fire start and initiate. Then the opposite thing happened to one of my clients that was a generator. They were not here to initiate. They came to me after investing with a high end coach, which we've all done many times, probably trying to find what's our right way. And her coaching, what she had gotten before, was go out there and make 100 cold calls to build her business to the next level. So she got 100 no's and she was completely fried, burned out, and she had invested, I don't know, over $50,000.
Ah,
So she came to me and she was completely frazzled. And I said, okay, let's experiment with not initiating. Experiment with your type, which is to wait to respond. So for her, it literally took like within 2 months of healing from the burnout, shifting the way she manifested, learning how to wait for the synchronicities, waiting to respond. And her business within just a couple of months turned it into like a multi six figure business where she was in more of a satisfaction, more of a ease with her business. So I see lots of things like that where someone who's really pushing burned out, or people who didn't know they needed to push feeling stuck. So it's happened in both ways. And I've seen transformations like that. And then, of course, I also have, a lot of people who are projectors like me who have been in careers that have burned them out completely and then decided to slow down, go deeper, understand themselves. And sometimes it takes more time to unravel who you are, but the joy in it, the feeling of knowing yourself happens almost instantaneously, but the results happen maybe a little bit over more of a longer time period, because I don't
mm,
want to say, oh, everyone who comes to me, all of a sudden they're
yeah,
millionaires. It was not like that.
yeah,
Sometimes
yeah.
people really need time, but it's like the inner transformation happens where they're seen. They felt heard for the first time. They feel safe in who they are. They feel safe to be different, safe to do something they were thinking about, but they didn't have the courage to do. So those kind of things happen also.
Well, that sounds like me. I think I'm a projector. So, what's the shadow no one talks about in being a projector?
The shadow is really the bitterness. Projectors are about 20% of the population, and they aren't here to work in the same way. So the generator manifesting generator is the bulk of the population. It's about 70% of the population, which kind of makes sense, right? Working 9 to 5, they're fast, they get things done, they go to sleep, they feel refreshed, and then they can go do it over again. And projectors kind of get tripped up into trying to work that way. They get tripped up into feeling like they need to hustle to keep up. And in order for them to manifest in a certain way, they need to kind of make things happen. And projectors will not work in that way. So they're a little bit slower. They have to pull back from the generator world, and they have to be kind of seen and recognized and invited before their wisdom is heard, before their genius is really felt and recognized. So if they're hustling or they're trying to keep up or they're pushing in any way, it dulls their brilliance. So yeah, so projectors are like the lighthouse, and they're here to kind of shine their light and be seen by the ships passing by like, "Oh, there's the beacon of light. Oh, there's a lighthouse." But instead, they're in the water trying to hustle with the boat.
Yeah. So, what human design type is secretly exhausting from pretending to be powerful?
All of them. So every type is trying to be something they're not. That's the secret to human design is that like we're all conditioned and we're all trying to be something we're not. That's why my book is called Are You Mute? Because it's really about like how many of you feel like you've been trying to fit in to a world that you're not born for. Me
Me
too.
for a long
Right?
time. Yeah. Seriously.
Right. And so believe me, like that's the majority of the people that come to my work. And that's why, because the majority of the people that come to me are like, okay, I don't fit in. I don't. Like, I have this big vision, or I have this creativity, or I have this, or I have that. And yet there's a calling, right? A calling to really do big work in the world. And so, how do you do it in a unique way? How do you do it that doesn't burn you out? How do you do it that feels authentic to you? And most of the direction we get, most of the coaching, most of the motivational world out there kind of puts you in a cookie cutter thing. And like, let's do it like this. And here's the next step. And here's what you do. And so I would say that every type in some way is trying to be something they're not. Every single person tries to fit in. There's always something and somewhere in your chart where you won't totally fit in. So almost, and let's put it like this too. Okay. So what this system is saying is the art of differentiation. So even though the world wants to put you in this group, the world is trying to say, although things are changing. Okay.
Yeah.
So we call the next 400 years, starting in 2027, we're calling it the era of the individual because the grid is changing, the dynamic is changing. Whereas for the last 411 years, everything was based on family, working, and living that ideal, the American dream
Right. Right.
life,
Yes.
right? And so it's changing. So we're in this phase over the next decade where people are going to be pushed to find their individuation. And the truth is, we're all individuals. I mean, everyone has a unique DNA code. Every single person has a unique fingerprint, right? So instead of grouping people together, oh, you should do this job. You're good at accounting, okay, you should do this. Or instead of that grouping, what the energy is going to be, and this is on the collective scale, the energy is going to be individuation. And all businesses are going to thrive in their uniqueness. So I think what that would mean, like kind of just looking at corporations, is those kind of franchise corporate models are going to go out of style. Where I don't know where you live, but where I live, even though Starbucks are going out of style,
Yeah.
where it's like now people want more of an individual kind of cafe feeling again.
Yeah.
They want something unique. They don't want just the whole cookie cutter thing. We want unique, personalized boutique experiences where we feel seen, we feel connected, and we're not just in the cookie cutter thing.
Yeah.
So that's across the board happening.
So you work with people to try to help them find their true inner authority and power and how to access that. So why are so many people afraid of their own inner voice?
That is such a great question. And there's a couple of reasons. There's what we would call is the program,
Mhm.
or some people call it like the matrix, or the system that keeps your mind spinning out. So it's thoughts are addictions. We wake up and we just start spinning out on what we've got to do today, what we got to do tomorrow, what happened yesterday, who said the wrong thing to us, what we did wrong. So the thoughts are the place keeping us stuck in the patterns of behavior. Okay, here's the fear.
Yeah.
Where people are afraid is when they stop the thinking mind and they begin to access their truth, which is their existence beyond the mind. They don't recognize what they're experiencing. The mind is uncomfortable and starts to oftentimes panic. So, and also the fear is a conditioned thought process as well. And I think almost people are addicted to the fear. There is the power of the thinking mind. Here's the other thing, Jackie, is that we have glorified the intellect, right? So we put intelligence as the most important thing on the planet. I mean, look at the richest person in the world is one of the smartest people in the world, right? Because we glorify the intellect. It's not like we're saying, oh, the person who's the most self actualized, the kindest person should be given the most money because they've looked at themselves, they've healed, they're kind. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
We don't value it as much.
Okay, then let me ask you this question because you raised a good point there. How do you tap into, because when you're in your conscious mindset and just in that being, how do you tap into divine guidance versus ego?
Think it is a process. You can begin to feel the difference because the divine process is one of calm, witnessing. It feels like loving, it feels like peace. And then we have these signatures as well. So this and I think even Abraham Hicks, the law of attraction, they talk about like peace, joy, love, satisfaction. Like these energies are when you start moving more into the divine field, the consciousness, the passenger, the witness. There's so many different words. And I think as humans, personally, I don't think as a species we are as evolved as we think we are. So, as a species, we're still new to this. We're trying to understand it. We don't really scientifically understand what the soul is, even, or who we
Yeah.
are, why we're here. I think the mystics and the gurus and the spiritual teachers have been speaking on this for a long time. But as a collective and as a species, we're still kind of stuck in the material world and we don't see the soul in the humanity. And so it really is a learning process to realize that the ego is the fear based construct. And the ego is important. That's the other thing, is that the ego and the mind and the intellect is all important. It's just that it's not all important.
Mm.
It's not the only thing that's important. And the more you're able to quiet the mind through meditation, active meditation, I think is really, really important. I highly recommend meditation on the daily because that is the place where you recognize the calm, you recognize, and then you can see where you need deeper healing. I think oftentimes if you can't sit with yourself if you're in pain or if you're in some type of personal psychosis or addiction or anger or whatever it is that's going on, you have to learn how to sit with it and, journal it out, love yourself through it. There's so many. The thing is about today, whereas when I was in my 20s, there was very, very few techniques that you could just go online and be like, okay, let me learn to tap. Let me do yoga. Let
Yeah.
me do the breathing exercise. Like there's so many things you can do now. There's almost like no excuse to be sitting in so much pain because there's so many tools to create that space of connection and freedom and the space where you see the difference between the ego and the divine source. Yeah.
Okay. So let's go back to because you left the corporate world, the mainstream world. You appeared on the Tyra Banks show, The View, that world. What did you leave behind that you'll never ever go back to?
I think it was the hustle.
Mm,
It was the hustle. It was feeling like I needed to bend over backwards and work long hours, work really, really hard, and be exhausted morning, afternoon, and evening. That is over for me. A lot of that has to do with the age stage as well. But I've seen, you get older, you realize, okay,
mm.
I don't have that kind of energy anymore. But I do think that if I knew what I knew now, then I would have been able to be more balanced and I would have been more productive because I think the thing is that when you're rested, when you're nourished, when you're nurtured, when you're in your center, you actually are more productive. Alignment brings more success than hustle. But it does take a shift of awareness and a shift of daily focus. So, yes, I will never go back to that.
Well, how do you balance being a mystic and a millionaire? Because a lot of people are trying to do that, and they're saying, how do I do this?
Yeah, I think that this is the deep transformation that we are in, the spiritual beings are in,
Yeah,
because I think that, so many lifetimes, and many of you who are mystics probably relate to this. There are so many lifetimes we took the vow of poverty, probably. I know that that was a big piece that I needed to heal inside of myself to step into my financial success is places where I felt it's not spiritual to make money. And I have also spiritual teachers now that are still in that mindset, who are still really in this kind of poverty ego.
get it. And people
I
are
don't really
trying
know
to
exactly.
suppress that, right? So how do you teach people to love the parts in themselves that they're not trying to suppress and get out of that mindset?
Right. I think that it is a re-evaluation of the principles and the values. So I think sometimes when we step into money, we think it's not spiritual. We think it's not mystical. Somehow we've deemed it as, or somehow in the past, it's been deemed as not spiritual. And I think that the teachings that I embody is really bringing the spiritual mindset, which is the divine connection, kindness, flow, not sacrificing the self for the money, right? So opening up the receiving, opening up the abundance, but not sacrificing for the abundance. So oftentimes people step into the abundance first before the alignment. And then they may have to go back into the alignment and go into a humble space. Like, so when I left corporate, I didn't immediately make the kind of money I made in corporate. I had a good, like, I don't know how many years it took, maybe 4 years before I replaced my corporate salary, where I cut back. I lived humbly. I drove a less fancy car. I sold my car, bought a less fancy car. I cut down and lived humbly. And that's the other thing I don't think people are talking about too much because everybody thinks, oh, yeah, we need to be rich and we need to be mystical. And I think it happens when you're in alignment and you're in your truth. It's a byproduct of who you're becoming, but you can't force it. And if you're not making money, there's nothing wrong either. right? It's a process, but you also have to stay with the abundance while you're not making money. That's the other.
How do you do that?
So that's the other key. So when I was moving from the corporate career to my business now, it was visualizing the abundance and seeing it and holding it even when it wasn't there yet. Even when my business hadn't fully bloomed. So I went back to corporate, was it twice? I think I went back twice because I left and my business still wasn't making as much. And I thought, oh, I'll never be able to do it. And they offered me a promotion. So I went back. So
Oh,
that happened to me twice.
wow.
So the level of courage it takes to know that, like, okay, it's not here yet, but you have to visualize it, know it. And even when it doesn't show up yet, you hold the vibration and the frequency of the door opening. And I think that it does take daily mantras, daily journaling, and the ability to hold the vision when you don't see the confirmation on the material plane yet. So that process is so profound. I mean, for me, it was like just how much joy I was in not being in the corporate, right? I like loved my life. So the wealth and the abundance was in the like, okay, I'm not working that hard, but you had to like not go into the fear of
Right.
like, okay, I'm in my 40s. Where's my 401k? Will I make
Yeah.
it happen?
Well, you said too in the past that your genius lives where you've been shamed. Can you expand on that and what that means?
Well, I think that some of our pain points and our breakdowns are the places where we have the greatest superpower, where we learn the most, where we can discover the greatest wisdom. And we, so in some of the conversation that we've been having,
Mhm.
we talk about the not self themes. We talk about where we've been conditioned, and it's also where we've been wounded or shamed or where we've had the greatest trauma. Those places provide the deepest transformation. So, for everybody listening, when you've had your dark night of the soul, where you've had your breakups, meltdowns, job losses, financial losses, the places where you're at your lowest point, those are the moments of breakthrough and transformation. That's the time when the ego lets go and says, okay, God, help me, right?
Yeah.
Help
Yeah.
me through this time. And that's when we make the greatest surrenders. And that's when the transformations are usually the biggest.
Well, then how then if like you said, if someone, at their lowest point in their life, they have bills to pay, they have the kids, the trauma, how do they begin to even live by design?
It is scary. I mean, I would say that that is my story. So when I left my corporate career, and I told you I went back several times, well, one of the other things I did that was not my design was buying a brick and mortar raw vegan juice bar for passive income is what I thought was passive income. So I took my life savings trying to get out of corporate and invested in a brick and mortar business that I knew nothing about. And that was before I really found out I was a projector. So, just as an FYI, a brick and mortar business is not passive income. Okay. No brick and mortar business is passive income. Okay. So, and this was in West Hollywood. So, if any of you guys know LA, like I was in the center and I lived in Long Beach. So, I was driving, like, I mean, the commute was 2, 3 hours a day. And the store was open at 6 a.m., closed at 7 p.m. So this was not passive income. And I had my whole life savings invested in this. And I had a manager who was stealing from me. I had employees that were in their 20s that were just, I mean, the whole thing was pure chaos. And it was the moment of breakdown. My accountant basically said, you're about to lose everything. You need to be at the store 24/7 and find out where the money's going because someone was stealing from me. We didn't know where it was going. And I was in such burnout and such crisis and so much pain. And I just found out I was a projector. So living correctly as a projector means that you don't work full time, that you surrender to a more balanced life. So, and what we say is if you are living correctly, then everything works out for you, including the money. So everything will work out for you. So I was in such a crisis point. I was about to lose my entire life savings, my investment in this business, everything, my home, my everything. So I made like the radical, I mean, I guess, this goes back to your other question, like, where was the biggest rebellion you had? Like, this is my rebellious radical moment was when I decided to not show up at the store, to let the chips fall where they may. And I decided to sleep in, relax, and study my human design because I felt that was the only thing that was explaining why I was in so much crisis, why nothing worked out for me, why I was investing, I was initiating, and projectors are not here to initiate. They are not here to do that. And I thought, oh my God, that's exactly what I did wrong, and this and that. So I said, you know what? Let the chips fall where they may. And I literally had those ugly cry moments on the bathroom floor where you're just sprawled out and you're like, oh, I'm gonna die. This is never, I'm gonna lose my home. I'm gonna lose, like, I had that
Yeah.
moment. Like, it was the crisis breakdown where everything was falling apart. And by the grace of literally God, I was able to, at the very last minute, sell that business.
Yeah.
And I was able to get out of it and have someone else take it over. And I didn't lose everything. I was in debt. I was probably $200,000 in debt by the time it was over, but I didn't lose everything. I still got my home. I was able to sell it. I still had a little bit left because of the sale that I could make the transition to my life now, but it was not a lot. I mean, and believe me, I had panic attacks day in and day out. I mean, I was terrified. So hopefully you guys are not have as much anxiety as I do. I come from a long lineage of people with anxiety. So this world, reality, earth school, or earth, whatever you want to call it, the simile, whatever, the matrix, whatever you want to call it, like,
Yeah.
it is not easy, but it is a game that you can master. It is scary and it takes courage to live your truth and to live your design. I am not saying that was any of that was easy, but it was the right path. It was me choosing to live my design. And within a certain amount of period, it took me, maybe like 4-year period where I was able to replace my corporate salary. I was able to work doing what I loved. I was able to wake up, study my human design. That's what I wanted to do. Wake up, rest, do my morning meditations, do my yoga, do my healing journey, journal, then start manifesting what it is I was feeling. I wanted to be of service. I wanted to do what I loved. I wanted to help people. I felt it inside me. I didn't know how it was going to work. I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I trusted. I kept walking forward. Like I said, I cut my expenses down and waited for that transition to happen. Now, when I was in corporate, I wanted a guarantee. That's why I bought the brick and mortar. Oh, that business, and believe me, the franchise that I bought, several of them are doing great. It wasn't the franchise. The franchise did really well for many, many people. It was me. It was wrong for me. It was wrong at that time of my life. It was the wrong choice for me. And so every choice is really personal. It's really individual, really, really personal, right?
Let's just say
Yeah.
the human design system disappeared tomorrow. How would you guide people back to their divine blueprint without it?
Well, now that we know it, it couldn't disappear because it's based on birth time. So as long as you know the time you're born, you don't need the internet to figure out your design. You don't need the charts. So it's kind of like the old astrology, you were able to base it off of the stars and the planets, and that there is a grid where you can figure it out. So now that we know it, anyone can figure it out at any time. But let's put it like, let's do if you didn't know it, how would you figure it out? Right.
Yeah.
So I think that it's about the experimentation of figuring out one. So the different things that you would contemplate is, are you repressing your emotions? Okay, so the first question is if you're emotional, are you repressing your emotion? Are you burned out? Are you intuitive? So, intuitive, splenic people or sacral people are in the moment. Do you have good results when you make quick decisions? Or are you somebody who needs to wait for decisions? So, you can kind of through experimentation figure out what's correct for you. So in human design, they say that not everyone should listen to their intuition as a guiding system. So that's an interesting little piece. And the reason why is because some people's inner authority is emotional. So that's why I say, are you listening to your emotions? So if you're emotional and you really were honest with yourself about whether you were repressing the emotions. Because the first thing emotional people do is repress the emotions. And they're like, no, I'm not emotional. So it's like almost everybody who's emotional is the most calm emotional people
Mm.
because they've spent so much time being told, you're too emotional. You shouldn't cry. Don't feel. And so they've learned how to press it, press it, press it down. Press, press, press. So
Yeah.
I've seen people who are like scientists who are emotional that they look like robots because they've repressed it so deeply.
Oh, geez. Oh my goodness. That's horrible.
So feel the emotions.
Let it out. Why not? So my final question to you. In a world obsessed with achievement and validation, how do we define happiness, or how do you define happiness? And what part of your design leads you straight to it?
I love that contemplation. And thank you for the contemplation because we all need it. So for me, coming back to the very first full circle question is it's about being yourself. I do believe that true happiness is when you fully get the freedom to be authentic, to be in alignment with your truth because we're all different. We all have a unique puzzle piece on this planet. And when you shave off those little parts or you try and squeeze into something that is so uncomfortable, think about those shoes that are too tight in your little feet, like we want to be our unique puzzle piece. And when you allow your uniqueness to shine, you have your role. We all want to feel like we're making a difference, that we have a purpose. And I believe we all do. And the purpose is found when we live our authenticity. And I believe that's where true happiness comes from, is being in your authentic truth.
100%. Raquel, thank you so much for reminding us that freedom isn't found in fitting in. It, like you said, it's found in authenticity and remembering who we've always been. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. And please don't forget to get your human design chart, send it to me so I can look at it and I'll tell you which type you are.
Okay. I'm really anxious about that too. I will. Thank you so much. Raquel, thank you for showing us that alignment isn't a buzzword, it's a birthright. You've reminded us that our greatest power isn't in playing by the rules, but in remembering who we were before the world told us who to be. Your voice, your fire, and your wisdom. It doesn't just teach, it activates. And here on Different Facets of Happiness, we believe the truest form of joy comes from when you finally stop asking for permission to be who you are. So for anyone listening today, if your soul felt seen, it's because Raquel just held up a mirror to your design. So until next time, stay rebellious, stay radiant, and above all, stay radically you. I'm Jackie Denise, and I'd like to thank you so much for joining us today. Take care.